Good to be with you as always on Friar Podcast, brought to you by NBC 7. Talking some spring training with Todd Strain. I'm Darnay Tripp. It's been some happenings, Todd Strain. Some surprises, some maybe we expected or things have played out as anticipated, but always a lot to discuss. How are you? How does this Tuesday afternoon find you? I should say, earlier in the week than we typically do our Thursday episode. I'll be off the next few days. Derek Togerson will be off the next few days. Todd Strain might be off right now. His video froze, so I'm not sure what's going on there. Oh, he seems to be back. So again, we didn't want this week to go by without an episode. So myself, Todd Strain, for the next 50 or so minutes, talking Padres and what we've seen and what we've heard over the course of the first, week and a half or so of spring training, as we look ahead to Thursday's first game against the Dodgers. And then we'll be seeing Padres on a daily basis up until mid-March when they ship off to Seoul and things start for real. So a lot to talk about, a lot to be excited about, Todd.
There you go, boy. We're going to be seeing the Padres every day until November, Darnay. They're going to the start of their World Series run that they didn't do last year.
That's right.
Positive here.
I love I love the attitude. Yeah, Sunday we're doing sports wrap, and I was looking at the schedule. I was like, starting this Sunday, there's going to be Padres games every single Sunday except for one. I think that day in March between the Seoul Series and Petco Park opening day. And so, yeah, it's great to have it back in our lives. So very excited about that. Before we really get going, got to say thanks to the sponsor of the On Fire podcast. That is OG's. Be on the lookout for new menu items at OG's. You can always take advantage of their award-winning beers. Great place to watch games, whatever your sport of choice is. We're getting down to the wire in college basketball, obviously NCAA tournament. All the TVs. OG is a great place to check out the action. Todd's a diehard NBA fan. He's watching the Lakers every single night. NHL.
It's rough sometimes. It's rough these days sometimes.
And of course, the Padres. And certainly once the season starts, OG is a great place to keep up with the Friars. You can make use of the OG's loyalty program. It's super easy. You can do it online, earn loyalty points, rewards, and exclusive offers, all of which leads to fun and free food. And now it is easier than ever to order OG's online and get it straight to your door. So without further ado, the welcome music. On Friar Podcast, he is Todd Strain. I am Darnay Tripp, coming at you on a Tuesday afternoon. If you are watching live on YouTube, please get in the chat. Let us know what you think. What's caught your interest, questions, concerns, what you're excited about a week or so into spring training. We always love getting to your comments, your thoughts, and questions, so we'll definitely include those. Thanks for watching on YouTube. Thanks for listening in your podcast app. And hey, thanks for being with us, Todd. Come to us from the Strain residence. What is the spring training storyline that you have found most interesting to this point?
Well, 100%. It's Ha-seong Kim playing shortstop. Xander Bogaerts moving for the first time in his distinguished major league career off of shortstop. It's a position he has been attached to, obviously physically and mentally. He takes it as a badge of honor. That's his thing. He's a proud veteran for the Padres in really year two of an 11-year contract, 10-year contract. To move him off the position they signed him to a huge free agent contract is surprising. It's something that's probably for the better of the team. I think a lot of Padre fans and baseball experts thought this would happen eventually, but for it to happen when it did this early in his Padre career is shocking to me. It's surprising. And how it all kind of went down in Peoria was a little bit strange, a little Padre-esque. but here we are. And I think the team is better for the move. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, you were in Peoria just a few days before that. Did you have any inkling that something like this was going down?
No, and we went early. We got kind of the first bit of action there, I guess, kind of a day into it. And so we were there Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. They canceled their workout Thursday. Not ideal for us, selfishly speaking, because we have limited time out there. And so at that point, we hadn't seen Xander Bogaerts. And so maybe if they'd worked out Thursday, we would have seen them. Maybe this would have come up. But we were gone by that point, and so kind of found out like everybody else. And it was interesting because, Mike Shildt reveals that that is the case, that move is happening. And he discussed how, he brought it up to Xander during their time in Aruba. But then you hear Ha-seong Kim say, "Oh, I wasn't expecting this news from Mr. Shildt," and Xander saying, "Yeah, this happened. This came together really quickly." And so something that like initially it made it sound like, okay, this was hashed out on the shores of Aruba over a delicious meal, was brought up, but not necessarily finalized. Now, there are some understandable reasons why that might be the case. Perhaps the trade speculation around Ha-seong Kim, maybe didn't want to move Xander off that, and then they trade him, and then he's back to short. I don't know. I kind of feel like some of that stuff could have been worked out. Like there could have been some caveats in the conversation, but that and Mike Shildt was asked about that and asked about kind of Xander's response. And he said, okay, yeah, that's fair. I understand. We had our reasons and I don't want to get into that. So you can read into that what you like. But I thought that was kind of a clumsy way to get started. It might not amount to anything or mean anything or have any significance in the long run. But somebody like Mike Shildt that seems to be such a diligent communicator, seems to value clear communication, setting expectations, that sort of thing. For this to catch those guys by surprise, I thought caught me by surprise. I thought that was a little bit strange. Again, will it mean anything? Who knows? Probably not. But I found that to be an interesting wrinkle in how that all kind of played out.
100%. When you make a move like this, whether you're in any kind of business or sport or a school district, anything you make, when it's something like this, you want a united front. You want the message to be clear and concise and coming from all parties. So this was, as you said, kind of a mixed bag. Everybody said a little bit different. And for that reaction to come out after all the stuff that happened last year was kind of like, here we go again. But I think to everyone's credit, they've kind of stabilized it. And I think while Xander Bogaerts might not be happy with this move, he's clearly putting team before self, which is important and is something that last year's squad was criticized for. So that's a huge step in the right direction. And as we've talked about, the clubhouse seems to be better this year. And this is a real first sign that maybe, was there going to be trouble? No, it seems to have passed over the whatever issues they had with this move, even on that initial comments, as you talked about. And I think they're all in a good place with this going forward and trying to put team ahead of individuals, which is very important for this particular Padres squad. It's still perplexing to me. It's still perplexing that you are going to be paying huge money, not huge money, but big money, $80 million to a first baseman with no pop, and $280 million over the life of the contract to a second baseman, a position where traditionally in this day and age of Major League Baseball, that is not huge value contract. So that's still troubling to me, big picture. But in the immediate, I like the move, and I like how everybody has kind of said, we're going to make this work rather than finding fault with it and trying to backstab each other and do little different things. So initial reaction positive, Darnay.
Yeah, and Xander mentioned, multiple times he was at peace with it, and maybe even more so than he would have expected himself to be. And so, Ha-seong Kim obviously complimentary of Xander and is excited about the challenge. Manny Machado has talked about, hey, selfless act by him. Mike Shildt kind of gushed about Xander and how much admiration he has for him because of that. And so, I think all these things are good in any year, particularly coming after a year like last year when guys maybe weren't necessarily all pulling in the same direction and maybe some egos got in the way of certain things. To have this kind of be a tone setter and to have this be an example for all the guys now going forward, I think is really important, and that could mean something because there's going to be other instances in through the course of the season where guys have to check their ego at the door, and they can kind of point at this like, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing business, this is the mindset and the approach that we're taking, where it's team above self. And so from a guy that you expect to kind of be a clubhouse leader to do that, I think is great. And, I think from Xander's standpoint, like, hey, he got the big money shortstop contract. And so now moving to second base, like if you're doing it the reverse, if you're
Mhm.
not making a whole lot of money and all of a sudden they say, hey, we want you to be our franchise shortstop, he's gonna say, well, okay, but you're gonna have to pay me uh in that manner going forward. He's already being paid in that manner. And look, a lot has been said and a lot will continue to be said about that contract, what that contract means, the value of it, how it kind of
Yeah.
hamstrings AJ Preller a little bit financially.
Mhm.
That all remains. But from Bogart's standpoint, like, if he's cool with playing that position, like, again, it's different from going the reversal when you're not getting paid because, like you said, they're paying a lot of money for a second baseman, but they're also paying for 20 plus homers. They're playing for clubhouse leadership. They're
Yeah.
paying for a guy that's won World Series, and so it goes beyond just what he does with his glove, obviously, and hopefully he's back to being that kind of consistent 300 type steady hitter that they gave him all that money to be.
Well, we can talk all in circles all we want about the move and the contract, but it's quite simple. If Xander moves to second base and he plays near all-star caliber defense and his offense returns to a little more closer to normal, then they get value for that contract. It's an expensive contract. It is what it
We might be having some
is.
issues with.
But if he plays up to that contract, then the move to second base and if he does that, he's in a good spot.
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. We might be having some internet issues on Todd Strain's end. So hopefully we don't lose you through the course
I
of
hear
this.
you loud. I hear you good. I hear you good.
um, yeah, so it'll be interesting. I think one thing, and Joe Musgrove was on with Darren Smith today, and kind of pivoting a little bit, but it made me think, Schilt was so effusive in his praise for
Mhm.
Xander Bogaerts. And that's one thing we've seen from Mike Schilt so far, is like really pumping his guys up. And Musgrove
Yeah.
said like it could almost maybe be like when somebody does that too much, it can almost be like a little bit cheesy, but it also gives you confidence. And when you talked about Jackson Merrill and how he's grown and developed, like, actually, no, talking about Manny Machado and Manny Machado, the rehab process. And he's like, our team did a great job with him, but it's the work Manny put in. It starts with him.
Mhm.
And he gets the bulk of the credit. He with regard to Merrill's talking about the maturity of the young guys, and he made sure to shout out different guys, but said circled back to Jackson Merrill. Did it with Joe Musgrove and the work that he did to kind of get healthy after an injury-plagued
Mhm.
season. And so we've gotten to know Mike Schilt a little bit more, but clearly, at least early on, he's making sure to like shout his guys up, gas them up a little bit, compliment them, make sure that their work has been acknowledged. Adrian Morejon, he said like, hey, I really feel like our team has won the offseason. Adrian, one of those guys that's right
Mhm.
there at the top of the list. Not that Bob Melvin didn't do that, but as we
Yeah.
kind of get to know Mike Schilt in this role a little bit more, he's a guy that seems to really see value in having his guys back, making sure like they know that that is the case, that he's pumping them up, that he's complimenting
Mhm.
them. And so that was one thing that kind of struck me when I was out there and then listening to the interviews, is like he seems to be going out of his way to like compliment and praise his guys more than he probably needs to, given whatever the line of questioning or the topic is. and I'm not sure we have Todd right now. we might we might need I don't know if Todd is able to relocate. We haven't had these issues before in the Todd Strain residence. If you're watching on YouTube, he's got a very pensive, thoughtful expression, like I'm saying something incredibly interesting, which probably isn't the case. But Todd appears to be having some connectivity issues, so apologies for that, and appreciate you sticking with us through it. But that's been kind of part of this first week and a half or so is figuring out who Mike Schilt is in this new role as a manager. And not that we were able to talk with him too much when he was in his previous role as a senior advisor, kind of behind the scenes. But and he's back, and he's in a different part of the Strain residence.
Can you hear me?
I think I got you now. Yeah, the living room has never failed us, but for whatever reason, the bedroom has been.
Sorry, dude. Sorry,
has been an issue.
Did you hear what I said on Mike Schilt?
No. The floor is yours.
I was just sorry about that. But I was saying that's not surprising, because when we heard after he was hired with the Padres, we heard about what type of manager he was with the St. Louis Cardinals. And his former players were effusive in his praise of Mike Schilt. They loved his managerial style. They all thought he connected and made deep relationships from everyone in that organization, top to bottom, players, clubhouse guys, front office people. So it's not surprising to me to hear that Schilt is kind of going out of his way to get personal with Padre players, develop a relationship with them, but also to sing their praises publicly in the media and to the fan base, because that plays well. Anytime you're an employee, you like to hear your boss say, hey, that Darnay Tripp, he's doing a great job. I really loved his 6 o'clock newscast the other night. That was great. That was witty. Hey, Greg Bledsoe, great. He does a wonderful job. Our storm coverage was awesome. So it's not surprising to me that Schilt is taking that tactic.
Yes.
And maybe giving him the benefit of the doubt, he being deep inside the Padre organization last year, he saw some things that he thought maybe that tact could help, could fix. And that was a way he said, hey, I'm going to do this. This is why I want the job. So we'll see. Let me ask you a question, because you were out there as we talked about, and that was really your first chance to see him around the club rather than in this kind of spidery on the outside area. What were your initial impressions as to how he related to the media, how he conducted the team, how he kind of held, because as we know, the managers, you got to hold the attention of not only the players, but the city. What was your initial impressions?
Yeah. And it's, again, partially because of when we were there, as pitchers and catchers and some of the position guys, Manny, Tatis, Crone, Kim, among others, getting some work in on their side, Jackson Merrill. And so he was kind of floating around. We caught him at one point having a long conversation with Machado, chatting with Jackson Merrill, but all things we normally see. I remember seeing, Manny and Melvin, talking for a while in Peoria, and that kind of being a conversation, talking with those guys about that discussion. I think with the media, again, selfishly speaking, he does give really thorough, thought out answers and really kind of like philosophical, like, this is what I believe, this is how I approach this thing, this is how we like to conduct business. And I can't remember exactly what the topic was, but I was listening to his kind of his scrum from the other day, and it was like a 1.5, 2-minute long, really detailed, thorough answer about their approach to this certain thing and how they plan on managing it. And so that's, I think what that tells you is he has a clear vision for how he wants to do business, how he thinks the show should be run. And it makes sense because, like, he's worked at all different levels. He was obviously in the St. Louis Cardinals organization. He talks about George Kissel all the time. Like, he has his mentors. And so obviously Melvin did as well. Jace Tingler less or so. And so you have a guy that, like, I think knows how he wants to conduct, but I think he also values the input of players. And I would guess pretty willing to adjust and adapt based on their needs and their styles and that sort of thing. So I think that's been kind of interesting because, again, from us, like, part of it is like we want them to say something interesting so we can put it on the news. You know what I mean? Like, as basic as that is, some coaches, managers don't give you a whole lot, others do. And he does give you a lot. and maybe at times more than you need, because he can be so detailed in his answer and really get into kind of the nuts and bolts of the minutia of it. And I think he's somebody that really enjoys the minutia. He enjoys the details. He enjoys kind of getting his hands dirty, and not just leaving kind of his generals or lieutenants to handle. Like, he wants to be and have influence over every part of that. Not that it's like micromanaging, but I think he genuinely enjoys it. He enjoys kind of the grind, and so I think, it'll be interesting how that kind of pans out, and then how that shows itself during the season when it is like getting side work in. Do guys hit or get field work in on a, before a Sunday day game, and all that stuff? And I think he sounds like a guy that will have the pulse of the team, which I think is really important. The leaders but not just the leaders, kind of everybody on the roster, of like, okay, what does this team need in this given moment, and kind of adjusting based on that. He also sounds like he's ready to kind of turn the page on 2023. And
we all are.
I think we all are, but look, it's going to be a question, right? It's going to
yeah.
continue to be a question. It's something that needs to be addressed. I asked him, like, how agonizing was it to watch the team struggle in so many big spots last year?
Yeah.
And he was kind of like, there's a lot of factors to that, but I think it's best if we put our energy in moving forward from that. And that kind of set me up to my question. My real question was like, what are you guys going to do about it?
Yeah.
And, he talked about, really being persistent in putting guys in situations, getting them comfortable with that, hopefully building some confidence. But you got the sense that this is something that they are going to work at, and maybe reframing those situations, maybe not leaving it up to like, oh yeah, those big spots, that's in the 8th inning, that's in the 9th inning, that's in extra innings, that's in close games. But like, having kind of that mindset throughout. There could be a spot in the 2nd inning where you have a man on second and 2 outs. Like, that's a big time situation. Or maybe it's, maybe even scuffling all game 6th inning and get somebody on first. Like, you got to move them along. You know what I mean? And so I think applying kind of that urgency, that thoughtfulness, that practice to more situations. His line was like, every at bat is a situation, and kind of applying that forward, so that maybe there's not, and I'm kind of reading between the lines a little bit, but maybe there's not so much weight on those kind of very specific, obvious big situations, having kind of a mindset and being prepared to attack every situation with some urgency, so that, and maybe doing so, it takes some of the anxiety and some of the gravity out of, like, when you get to the 8th and 9th, and it's obviously an important part of the game, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. And I think there was also just one more thought on last year. I think there was a thought that everyone always thought it couldn't get any worse. They were always going to turn it around. That was the thought outside of that clubhouse and inside of that clubhouse. So we are too good. We're eventually going to come back to our norm, and our norm is an all-star level for most of that, many of those players on that roster. And that never happened. So to get that season flushed away and as you said, maybe try a new approach, can only help. And when you look at this roster, Darnay, you are going to need to treat every situation as it's critical, because they're going to need to maximize opportunities in the 4th inning just as much as maximize those key 7th inning, late at bats, late bullpen situations. They need to maximize every ounce of juice they can from this roster in all 9 innings of baseball to have a chance to really make a wild card run.
And it's interesting you say that, because I think there are definite parallels between 21 and 23. Because I remember, like, 2021, like, they scuffled until like late March, then went on like a 9-game win streak.
Yeah.
And they played kind of roughly 500 ball. And then the end of June, I think it was, reopening day, they won like 11 of 12 to close out the month. And it was really like those 2 stretches that got them like 17 games above 500, wherever they were in their peak in like August. But it wasn't like they weren't just like killing it. You know what I mean? They weren't like super consistent, just like winning series after series after series. They had these hot streaks. during those lulls, it was kind of a similar tone. Like, we got the guys, they're going to turn it around. And then certainly once they started struggling in August, September, Jace Tingler, we're fighting. You know what I mean? Like, we're going to get clicking on all cylinders. Guys are battling. Guys are battling. And it was just like the same thing over and over and over. And I remember thinking going into 2022, like, okay, how are you guys going to approach this now if you're in that situation? They clicked, things happened the way they did. And then 23, it was almost kind of a similar tone to, we've got the guys, they're proven, it's going to happen. And just assuming that's going to be the case, but obviously not doing enough to fix this situation. It seems like one of the takeaways, the long way of me getting around to it, is like being pretty serious about it and not making any assumptions and having a bit more urgency to start the season. And then when things are maybe not going as well as they should. But at the same time, Melvin had kind of the closed door meeting earlier than we expected last year. So it's really hard to say, like, and it seemed like guys were pressing at points. So it's not to say they didn't care or just like assumed. Like, Juan Soto was really bummed out after his first month, and Xander Bogaerts when he was struggling, and Manny. And so I don't know, hopefully they don't end up in that situation. But if they do, there were clearly some lessons from last year, and hopefully it's enough to kind of get a better idea of how to flip the switch. And maybe September, that experience together will benefit them because they were a completely different team for whatever reason. Maybe it's because Jurickson and Profar was around, but they did get it going. It just, by that point, it was too late.
Jurickson Profar, the feel-good DJ. I love it. He makes every Padre game better. Yeah, I mean, when you look at this team, you're going to need everyone, the old expression, rowing the boat, rowing in the same direction. The roster is not what it was the last few years ago, but that's not to say this roster is not good enough. It can be. You have some really good players in your everyday lineup. You have some huge holes. Your pitching staff is top heavy. We know that, but there is a makeup. If you're looking for positives, that you can look at that bullpen and say, hey, if things work right and things break right, this can be a really good bullpen. And if these 4 and 5 starters can get me into the 5th inning, we can make this work. So there is a semblance and a pathway to success that is harder to see with this team than the previous few years, but you can still see it. It's not the days of your forlorn Padres, woe is me. I mean, there's still a pathway to success. It's just not the all-star steamroller path that was before. And we'll see if Schilt can find that pathway. It's on the players and it's on Schilt. A little bit of both. You got to find that together. And hopefully, as you talked about, some of the things he's instilling early in spring training in Peoria can lay the foundation for that. So we shall see.
I wanna look ahead a little bit, but I should ask, like, we did hear from Eric Kutsenda for the first time. He is a real human being. He is alive. We've seen him. We've heard from him and got a better idea of like his approach. Was there anything about that? I don't think there are any big surprises. I think I was listening to our buddies John and Jim, and John was particularly like, hey, the fact that he said AJ Preller is going to be accountable and didn't give him necessarily a vote of confidence. You could definitely read something into that. Like, we're going to evaluate year by year. We're going to have goals and that sort of thing. This feels like a big year for AJ Preller. If things don't go well, if they fall short of the playoffs, or if there's some of the issues that we've seen, I could see that, leading to some changes. But there's nothing that seemed all that earth shattering from what we heard. And obviously, presents himself and it would seem completely differently from Peter Seidler, who, had this warmth about him and, seemed to enjoy kind of having fun with the media and just more kind of candid and more himself. Eric Kutsenda is basically what you'd expect from a managing partner at a private equity firm. He kind of carries himself in that manner. Peter Seidler did not. And I think that's part of the reason he connected with people in such a meaningful way and was such a beloved figure. But saying stuff about parades and and kind of needling
Yes.
reporters about sustainability and all that stuff. There was just kind of
Yes.
like a different heart and personality to him, and maybe that'll come out with time with Eric Kutsenda, but didn't seem like there was anything that caught anybody by surprise when he finally took the mic.
Yeah, and this is not a negative of Eric Kutsenda or anything else, but you would expect what he said and how he phrased it to be exactly like a man who has spent his whole life in finance and has no experience running a professional sports organization, nor in speaking publicly for a professional sports organization. He said very cliche answers that were, governed. His answers were governed by the numbers, what the numbers are going to say. He said he's going to honor Peter Seidler's legacy. He said all the things you would expect him to say. And he sounded like a finance man who was running a baseball team and making his first public comments for the first time. And that's kind of what it was. And that's not no shot at him. That's just, he's in a very tough situation and he's learning as he goes on this. And you cannot expect him to roll out there and be as engaging as Peter Seidler, who was truly a once in a generation owner for San Diego sports. So yeah, nothing to answer your initial question. Nothing surprised me about that. I didn't expect him to say anything. It was just kind of like, here I am. I'm actually a person, as you said, and not a robot, not a fabrication. And I don't think anything he said moved the needle one way or another. And I don't think anything he will say in his initial season or any action he's going to take is going to deviate much from this plan. I think we know where their payroll is going to be. I think most of his decisions will be finance based, not based on bringing a parade through Broadway. So that's a different little mindset with Padre ownership. But I think Eric Kussenda's, he's not going to lead this team into the gutter. I don't think that. I think he's going to try to stay, as you said, as close to Peter's vision with more fiscal responsibility. And he's obviously under some constraints to do so.
And I think if Peter Seidler were still around, that they would still be kind of taking a step back financially, I would guess. I'd guess they're probably still trying to get under the CBT. I might be wrong. I don't know. But that's, I kind of think they're doing a lot of these things regardless. And I think the expectation was, there's probably a little bit less loyalty as it pertains to AJ Preller than Peter Seidler, who clearly had an affection, a lot of loyalty to AJ Preller and valued what he did. I think Eric Kutsenda does as well. I think Eric Kutsenda values the stability that they have in the front office, and I don't think he's going to come here and just kind of, what's the term I'm looking for? Heads will roll, like Ron Fowl. Like I don't think it's going to be a situation like that. No. But if it gets to a point where he feels like he needs to make a change, like it will he'll probably feel that in his chest less than Peter Seidler would if he had to make a decision like that. Okay, games on Thursday. Games begin on Thursday. Joe Musgrove, Kevin Acee just reporting that Michael King will have a live BP, instead of following Joe Musgrove.
Oh, that kind of stinks. I wanted to see King on the hill.
I agree. I was disappointed to see that as well. So I was finding his tweet just to make sure I have that right. But Yuki Matsui is, we found out today from Mike Schilt, expected to pitch as well on Thursday. So that'll be fun. It'll be fun to see Matsui for the first time. Darvish, according to AC, likely won't make his Cactus League debut until next week. And yes, Michael King will throw a live BP session instead of pitching in Thursday's spring opener, which is too bad because I was looking forward to, as you were, Todd, seeing him. But, starting with some big guns right out of the gates, I think that's something a lot of people have talked about is, you're not seeing, Matt Waldron out there. You're not seeing Adrian Morejon. You're not seeing Pedro Avila, a guy that's like battling for a roster spot or a rotation spot. One of your big three, and we thought two of the big three right out of the gates with a kind of a compressed spring training. It makes sense with the Seoul trip. But that's exciting. I enjoy seeing, like, we'll enjoy seeing Merrill, we'll enjoy seeing
Yeah.
Salas eventually, and Jairo Uriarte and all these other guys. But it's also fun to see like the big names, and so we'll get a chance to do that right out of the gate. And I'm really curious, like what does the lineup look like? Do you see what does Manny's day-to-day workload look like? How
Yeah.
often is he in the lineup? He's taking BPs, he's working in the field. I would expect him to be in a DH role, as we begin spring
Yeah.
training. But how does that kind of evolve through time, and how quickly will they get Tatis and Bogarts and Jackson Merrill and these guys, regular at bats, day to day at bats, that sort of thing? It seems like there's a bit more urgency to get the work in than there would be in a normal spring training, if that even exists anymore.
Yeah, and the first thing off the top about Musgrove starting Thursday's Cactus League opener, to me, that we say Cactus League opener, what's that matter? Well, who cares if he's only going to pitch, a certain number of pitches anyways, who cares? To me, that's a huge sign coming off. You're an aging pitcher. You're a right-handed pitcher with right shoulder injury. For you to be on track to throw in the first Cactus League game is impressive. Every indication we've had is that Musgrove is doing great as he recovers from his injury. This is yet another sign, his first public sign. So that's huge because with your staff this year, as we know, it's diminished. So you're going to need Musgrove. You're going to need Musgrove healthy to eat innings and kind of be that leader of the rotation as he has been. So that's a huge sign to see him pegged to be the starter and on track for a healthy recovery. The other guys, Darnay, as you mentioned, I mean, we're not back to the hot lava era, but Jackson Merrill, he's got Padre Nation buzzing. People want to see him. They want to see him play the outfield. Is this a pipe dream? Can he really do it? Can he show us that he can play average, a little below major league average left field, and maybe this young kid's bat is going to pop and sizzle enough to offset any differences or negatives he provides in the field? We want to see that in spring training. That's exciting. And I think we want to see Machado because we had heard so much negativity concerning that tennis elbow surgery about maybe he doesn't come back till, May or June or something like that. But everything seems to be trending to a much quicker return than that. So we want to see him swing. And as you said, the stars are out front. It's fun. It's fun. Even though Padre fans are frustrated with their team, it's fun to see Manny Machado swing a bat, whether he's swinging it in Petco or on the road in Philadelphia or in Peoria. You want to see your guys out there playing. And so yeah, I'm jazzed to see Jackson Merrill. I'm jazzed when we finally get our first look at the Asian pitchers that they have brought in, when we finally get our first look at Michael King and the stars like Tatis and Machado. That makes me smile as a baseball and a Padre fan.
Yeah, and Tatis, came in super confident, got some work in with his dad during the offseason.
He was confident. That's surprising.
Yeah, believe it or not. Look, we've seen the confidence waver. There's no doubt about it. He's got swagger for days, but we've seen the confidence waver, and that was the case at points last year. And he said he never really found his swing and now had the time to do that. And so I think he's expecting an explosive season from himself, as are guys around the club. And so I think that's encouraging and exciting as well. And Jackson Merrill, like, I left. So Tuesday was my first day there. We talked to Jackson Merrill. We had a chance to hear from Mike Schild about Jackson Merrill. I think AJ talked about him as well. Like, I left Tuesday like Jackson Merrill's going to be on the opening day roster. And now who knows? Like, anything can happen. It's early. What does he do, as he's getting at bats in Cactus League games? But I felt, for a couple reasons. First off, I felt like AJ Preller is setting us up to have a young guy on the opening day roster. He name dropped Jacob Marcy in one of his Zooms during the offseason. I don't think he does that by accident. They've spoken openly about Jackson Merrill. Schilt talked about, the majority of the work he's going to get early on is going to be in the outfield. Why? Because they have one everyday outfielder. He was out there shagging fly balls. Like, I just feel like they are setting us up for this. They're talking about it in such a way that we should be prepared for that outcome. Apologies, John Conniff. Apologies, everybody on the Mad Friars crew. And I've texted John about this even last week. Like, it's just, one of them is going to be on the roster. And I'm not saying that that's the best way to bring these guys along. I just think that's the position they're in, the needs they have, and the way they've been talking about it. AJ said, we're not going to rush them along if they're not ready. We're not going to force it, blah, 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 blah. and saying, we want them to show us that it's their time. On that note, it seems like Jackson Merrill's done everything you can to this point to show them that he is ready. Now, again, those at bats, we'll see, because he's got the physical tools, he's got the athleticism. Dude looks good in a t-shirt. Like he is well built. He is filled out. Like he looks like a Major League Baseball player, and not to say he was scrawny last year. I was surprised at his height last year and surprised at how he's filled out in his build. Now this year, clearly he's put the work in. He's come here with the mindset that there's an opportunity here and I want to make the most of it. And you've heard that about guys like CJ Abrams, like the confidence and wanting to go out and prove it. Merrill seems like that guy this year. And so I think, and just kind of the athleticism seems to play in the outfield. He seems really comfortable. Again, going back to Kevin Acee, he's got a piece today about him where he's got some coaches talking about how good he feels out there. And so it just all seems to be trending in that direction. And I think, we can talk about the kind of the roster situation, probably still having 2 outfield spots up for grabs. Sarah said it with us and AJ Cassavell when I was out there, it makes sense that another veteran and a rookie, one of these young guys. And, as our buddy Gefilte Fish has mentioned, very normal thing for a rookie or two to make the opening day roster out of spring training. I don't see harm if the kid earns it. And I think the difference is rookies, yes, but they seem to maybe have a little bit more of a platform and a runway and experience to get to this point. I think it's not an issue with there being rookies, but has there been enough seasoning? I don't know. Yeah. But Merrill seems to this point to be built for it.
A rookie playing a position that he's never played before on a regular basis. Yeah. That's really the gist. What's interesting, really interesting to me, is normally organizations slow play this or diminish expectations or don't say things, as you said, to give the perception that they're thinking that he's an everyday or an opening day roster player. Normally they'll poo-poo that, right? They'll make it seem like if he makes a team, it's a miracle. Oh my God, he exceeded our expectations. How the Padres front office has kind of portrayed Jackson Merrill is almost, as you said, we are expecting him to make the everyday roster. And that's really an interesting way that they have we didn't come up with that on our own. That was everyone in the media has been fed that narrative that this is possible and he's up for it. And that's an interesting tack to take by the Padres front office to not downplay those expectations or say, oh, that's not going to happen, to feed those a little bit. And so we'll see how that plays out. But that's a very interesting way to play it. And it leads me to think 2 things. 1, he's going to make the team, as you said. And 2, that they think he's freaking awesome.
Yeah.
And they think he can handle this. And they think he can succeed, whether he's at the major league level, whether he's an outfielder or a shortstop early in his career.
Yeah. It's impressive. He's an impressive kid. Yeah. I think, it'd be good to have in the not that he's going to take on a leadership role, but it just kind of seems to be wired the right way. And doesn't hurt that there's a guy on the team in right field that had more outfield experience, but first full year at the position wins a Platinum Glove.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Coming from the infield, coming from playing up the middle in the infield, he can kind of pass along some of his experience, some of his wisdom to Jackson Merrill through the course of that process to help him along in his own journey.
Well, that's interesting that you bring up Tatis, because a few years ago when he arrived at spring training, we had heard about Tatis for years coming, and everyone said, oh, not this year. He'll be a September call-up, for sure a September call-up. But there was just this groundswell. He played so well through spring training. He forced the Padres' hand. He forced the Padres to put him on that opening day roster. And of course, as we know, he never looked back. There were a few issues, as we know, but his talent, he was ready to play.
Yeah.
Jackson Merrill, if he makes a team, he may end up forcing the Padres to put him on the team, but it feels to me, as I just kind of referenced, that they've already kind of put him on the team, which is an interesting way to do it. It's very different than how Tatis arrived in his his celebrated spring training, and just was a groundswell throughout spring training. And by the end, they said, you got to put him on the team. Whereas Jackson Merrill's here, and it seems like he already he almost has to lose his spot, I guess, rather than force him on the team.
And it seemed pretty obvious that Tatis had deserved a spot, and then as legend has it, Manny and Hosmer, and I think Ian Kinsler went to AJ and was like, you got to have him on the opening day roster. You wonder if it'll be quite that convincing with Jackson Merrill, where you'll have the established vets being like, yeah, you got to do this, or do they just need him to do, you know what I mean? Are they doing it out of necessity, whether or not he proves it as dramatically or as clearly as Tatis did. So that'll be interesting. And I think just seeing all the young guys, it'll be fun to watch Ethan Salas, but you don't necessarily expect him to factor in this year. It's more so just kind of seeing what he's capable of. And I don't have a discerning eye for this sort of thing, but people talk about his hands and how he receives pitches, and even not being like an astute evaluator of catchers, like by a long shot, he is smooth back there. He is like smooth and effortless, and just managed to seems to just hit a spot. I don't know. It's fun. So I think,
come on, Darnay, I've seen you pounding the dirt roads in the backcountries of Texas and Louisiana, looking for the next great catching prospect.
I wish. No, I can't fake it, but you can, even somebody with an untrained eye, you can see it a little bit. And so seeing those guys, but I think more so like the Paulies, the Marcys that you expect to really factor in, that'll be the fun, I think, of the days ahead once we kind of get into games. Something has to happen to, there's got to be a trade. I think at this point, free agent market's kind of dried up a good amount. Probably not going to be after Bellinger. I gotta think there's got to be a trade. And there are the Brewers, there are the Orioles, there are potentially the Cardinals. There's teams that have, other people have referenced the Reds. There are teams that have, the Brewers are having outfielders work in the infield.
Yeah.
The Padres are having infielders work in the outfield. Have you guys connected? Can we set up a Teams call to kind of iron out a deal of some sort? Because it just makes sense.
Well, you know how this goes. As spring training plays out, there will be injuries. There will be some other trades. There will be some prospects on other teams that force teams' hands. So suddenly a fourth outfielder may become available. Hypothetically, as you say, maybe a Brewers prospect surprises them, and they're like, we don't want to pay our fourth outfielder that rate. Here you go, San Diego. Something like that is expected to transpire. We just don't know what it is at some point. But you would think they would supplement that outfield with a little more veteran juice. We would hope.
I had forgotten. I remember some of the deals. I think Voit is what made me think of it. Now, 2022 is its own beast because of the lockout, and so they couldn't make deals, and so they really just had a month or a few weeks to get the stuff in. But they picked up Luke Voit during spring training, then Sean Manaea a few days before the first game, and then Taylor Rogers to settle the closer situation on opening day. So, we've seen AJ, and again, that was kind of by necessity, but be very, very active, at the 11th hour. And so it's certainly Darnay. Possible. It's wild that we're at this point and we're still kind of wondering.
Things can happen late. Watch this. Let there be light. Let there be light.
The sun must be slowly setting in Solana Beach, because you weren't that dark when we started, and I was like, what is this mood lighting?
Things can change. Change. I thought we were going to make it the whole podcast without having me to turn on the lights.
No,
so maybe someone will turn on the Padre lights late in spring training.
Yeah, I'm sure it'll happen. We know AJ Preller. I don't think it's due to a lack of effort, but maybe it's also kind of getting an idea of what they have in these young guys before they do something, and then also kind of other guys that they might be thinking about trading, and so gathering a little bit more information is probably not the worst thing. We put out 2 episodes last week. Derek caught up with the the guy that's heading the Point Loma biomechanics lab that the
Mhm.
Padres are partnering up with. So very cool new resource. So for more information on that, check out that episode. I caught up with Dennis Lynn of The Athletic, AJ Cassaville, MLB.com, Sammy Levitt, Padres Radio while I was out there. Good conversations with those three guys. So check that one out as well if you haven't already. And no regular Thursday episode. Again, myself, Derek, both off the rest of the week.
You're going to scout, dude, on the high plains of Texas, high plains of Kansas.
I'm heading to the backfields, Todd.
There you go.
Unless maybe, hey, if there's a major trade or something, we might have
There
to have a bonus or an emergency episode. So we'll see
do
how
it.
that goes. But thanks as always for watching. Thanks as always for listening. Enjoy spring training. Enjoy the games getting started. And we'll be back to discuss it all with you very soon. Thanks.